Okay, here we go. Part three. Still talk about this year in review. We're going to talk about Monte Carlo next. So Monte Carlo this year introduced quite a few new designs. Some of my favorites were the streaming was kind of cool. I believe there's one called the Avila. That one was kind of neat. They also introduced one called the Subway, which I really like. They did quite a few cool designs this year. As far as quality goes, I haven't worked with a new Monte Carlo product. I haven't seen them in person either. Most of the showrooms don't have a lot of them. However, one of my showrooms is getting a whole visual comfort showroom section added. So hopefully then I'll be able to start messing around with these new fans and seeing how they actually are. These days, Monte Carlo, well, technically, I don't even necessarily know if I can fully call them Monte Carlo anymore because literally Visual Comfort & Co. ceiling fans is like mostly what's on the cover. It's in very small print where it says Monte Carlo fans collection. So, like there's not a lot of Monte Carlo branding actually going on anymore. So I don't know whether eventually they'll phase that out completely. That name definitely didn't last long. It was started by Encon in, I believe, 96. Then eventually it was bought by Seagull. Then Seagull went with Generation. It's that or that Seagull was already with Generation. Either way, then they started getting more and more designerized until they got bought out by Visual Comfort. But yeah, overall this year, though, they did introduce some pretty neat designs that I did like. And I'm excited to see what they do next year. Usually every year they put out a few designs that I really like. The Chapman and Myers designs are by far my favorites. Pretty much every single Chapman and Myers fan that they've had, I have just absolutely loved. They do a really good job at designing fans. And up next, we are going to talk about Progress. Now, Progress this year honestly didn't do a lot. All they really introduced this year was, I believe, a new Trevina, and then they also introduced a new line of Air Pro ventless builders. And once you've seen one, you've seen them all. Practically every goddamn company makes a fan like that pretty much looks the same. So I honestly don't really care for them too much. They're okay. Some of them look better than others. The Progress one is nothing really special to write home about, though. A lot of the products that they put in the catalog that were interesting were ones that were introduced to fall of last year, so they're not technically new for this year, so therefore they don't count. And then in June, they did introduce a couple designs, but once again, there was nothing too interesting or special there. Overall, just a half-decent year for Progress. Anyways, actually not even half decent, just kind of meh, honestly. I was kind of disappointed. They haven't let me down, I wouldn't say they let me down, but this is the most, iffy introduction that I've seen yet that just hasn't caught my eye like the rest of the years. And up next is Quoizel. Now, Quoizel did actually introduce a few new Fandeliers this year, had quite a few of which I really love the designs for. One of them, I believe, is called the Kaufman. I believe that's the one that's got all the cool crystal on it that I really like. They also had one, I think, called the Barlow, which was kind of neat. It's got like a sort of like a glass piece that like goes around here, that's got a bunch of like either brass or silver sort of bars going up it. And then it's a bit taller than most of the other ones. But yeah, I kind of think that one looks cool. Overall, I feel like they did a pretty decent job. And of course, Quoizel's lighting is always on point as well. I just thought I'd mention that quick. Quoizel's a really good company. And up next, we have Quorum. Quorum did amazing this year. I'm really happy with the intros. Typically, what happens with Quorum is in January, they only introduced one or two new products, and a lot of the fans come out more in the summer. This year, however, they did actually introduce more fans in the winter and only one or two in the summer, so they kind of changed that around. And all the designs they put out this year were really, really good. The catalog layout, well, I should say the appearance changed a bit. The layout's still pretty much the same as it has been since like 2015. But yeah, and of course they introduced a new logo because I think, is it their 40th anniversary? I honestly don't remember. They celebrated some big anniversary. It's somewhere, it's not 30. I don't think it's 35. I think it's like their 40th anniversary or something this year, or maybe 45th. Either way, they redid the logo, which I think looks kind of cool. And overall, they did pretty decent this year. I like what they put out, and I'm excited to see what they continue to do. Quorum's always actually one of my favorites. Sometimes I don't feel like they get enough recognition, but I think that they actually do a pretty decent job, and some of the builder products aren't the worst either. Also, some of the extra steps, like on some of the builder fans, plating the motors, I think looks kind of good. Like they do that on the Capri. They're one of the only brands that really plates the motors and makes them look really decent. The Quorum I have here in my room, an old Decora model. This was like one of the last fans to be made without all the fancy plating and stuff. And then about 94 is when they really started to make things look really cool. But that doesn't really have to do with this year, though, so we're going to move on. Our next company is Hinckley. Now, this was Hinckley's first full-line catalog since they basically first bought Regency. And this year, well, first of all, the layout looks amazing. The new designs still look amazing as ever. They're doing such a great job. They turned a company that, in my opinion, was kind of dying out, and they made it look absolutely amazing. While I am sad that they got rid of a lot of the cool Regency designs that I really love, they kept a couple of them on, like the Bimini. That's one of them. That fan been around since like the mid-2000s or something like that, and that thing's still going even now. They redesigned the Hover a couple of years ago. That fan's still getting more popular. The Vantage and the Veil, those fans are as popular as ever too. They just did a really good job this year. I like some of the new flush mount products they've added in some of the larger sizes of fans that they've also added. Overall, just a bunch of really neat stuff. Hinckley is a brand that I would definitely recommend to continue to keep an eye on because I feel like they're doing a really good job. Up next, we have Royal Pacific. Now, Royal Pacific, they only introduced one new fan. It was another Aldea fan with 6 blades. But the real interesting thing is that they bought out by Ferguson. And actually, I forgot to mention, Minka also got bought by Ferguson. Now, for both of these companies, they're claiming it'll be business as usual. My showroom friends have been asking me, have you heard anything? What do you think is going to happen? Because they're concerned. Basically, ever since the whole Emerson thing basically went to crap, now that Minka's been purchased, they're concerned the same thing is going to happen with them. Minka's probably one of the best companies we've got right now, according to them. They really like Minka a lot. So if something goes wrong there, then they're going to be quite upset, and that's definitely going to hurt them a lot, too, in terms of business-wise. But yeah, overall, Royal Pacific didn't do a lot this year. The most interesting thing that happened was that they got bought out by Ferguson. Anyways, up next we have Savoy House. Savoy House introduced 2 new Fandeliers this year and 1 Meridian product. The Meridian fan's pretty basic. It's another one of those weird warehouse shade looking things. Fandelier is where it gets interesting. One of them is just meh, but the other one, though, uses cane. The same cane that we know from the 1980s ceiling fans. It's that same material brought in with either soft brass or I believe black, and it's like woven around the whole thing. Then you've got the finished trim around it. Then you've got one of the little portable fan motors inside with the little fan or the little blade. The wicker or the cane is by far my favorite part. That's what makes that fan really special, that they brought that design back. And if you want to see it, just go check out their website. You'll find it somewhere. Anyways, up next, well, let's see. We've already talked about Sunset or Visual, or not Visual Comfort, but whatever they are, Luminance, so we're going to skip over them. Yeah, Transglobe is the next brand. They didn't really introduce anything too interesting or too special this year. Nothing that's really worth writing home about, just another basic builder product. They don't really do a lot with ceiling fans. They do more with lighting. That's what they're better known for. So not a whole lot else to mention from them. Next up is Vaxel. They introduced quite a few products this year, and their couple supplements they put out. A lot of the designs I do kind of like. They're interesting. Well, I don't know if I would put them in my own house because I'm not 100% sure on how the whole quality situation is. They definitely don't look horrible. They've also discontinued all of the light kits that they offered for their fans. I know this because my rep sent me a closeout list. And yeah, pretty much all the light kits I believe are gone now, which is kind of unfortunate. All the ceiling fan designs are still there. The fan collection seems to be growing. That or they're going to discontinue a bunch of them next year. I don't know. We'll have that to talk about next year. Anyways, next company is Westinghouse. They introduced a few new designs this year. How they do it is, right at the beginning of the year, they've got a catalog. And then a few months later, that's when they really bring out all the new products. And then those new products are integrated into the catalog the next year. And then that whole thing sort of repeats, and they've got all the online brochures for those new products. But yeah, that's how it's gone for quite a while from what I can tell, actually. Well, for the last few years, anyways, that's how it's really been going. And our next company to talk about is actually our last company, and that is Wind River. And Wind River did a really good job this year, once again putting out another catalog. They introduced quite a few great new designs. I quite liked the Cold Water, that one was cool. The Mini also looked quite good. And the only Wind River fan that collectors worked with, they said, is terrible. Of course, that was one of the cheaper ones. Some of their more expensive, nicer models are actually really, really nice. I've worked with quite a few of them at local showrooms, and they're really good fans, actually. So, yeah, definitely do consider Wind River because they definitely aren't the worst. I really like what they did this year. And now, I did mention in part 2 that there was something else I want to talk about, and that is what I like to call the or I should say on or off years with quotes, because that's just basically what I call it. Where basically, one year you get a set of intros that are just meh, then the next year you get a really good year. Every company has an on and off year, but as a whole, I can usually determine whether the fan industry had an on or off year. This year was an on year. There was a lot of really amazing stuff that I liked. Last year was an off year, and typically I've noticed it goes on year, off year, on year, off year, and then it just alternates. So my prediction for the next year is that we are going to see some sort of iffy, well, I shouldn't say iffy. We'll see. Usually on these off years, we get a couple really interesting products, but that's about it. Whether we'll get a whole bunch of them to make it an actual on year, whether we'll just get a couple, I cannot say. I haven't seen a whole lot of new products yet. As my reps find out about them, they send that sort of stuff my way. So I don't know a whole lot so far. So I guess we will see where this takes us in the future. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this little mini series, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.